Good day, folks. Bob's back. Bob's back with a globe. Changing environment, changing scenes, shifting sands globally. But one thing that's not changed is China. Really. So we really had a lot of exuberance coming, especially from the financial community, global financial community, which is about Xi taking a step back, Xi taking a U-turn, and suddenly pretending that he was a softer self, going easy on the commercial sector, going easy on private sector, making advances and suggesting that he was extending some cordiality towards the United States. But folks, remember, it's only the United States. India ain't there. India ain't there. So anybody who keeps jumping up and down thinking that things are going to change as far as India is concerned, keep watching those borders, guys. Keep watching those borders. But thank God for this. And hopefully this will make the government think otherwise and put some pressure on it. What is it? It says, India sees China as greatest threat, says Michael Kugelman in the foreign policy. He says China's rise in recent years has provoked a change in India's strategic threat calculation, a shift now reflected in public sentiment. This week, a Morning Consult poll revealed that Indians see China as India's greatest military threat. 43% of respondents named China, while only 13% cited Pakistan. Of course, there were some people who also, I'm not sure how the United States is a threat, but there were 22% of those two, right? So the US is a greater threat than Pakistan. So I'm not sure why this government continues to change its domestic policy based on just Pakistan, right? And you have this, right, when somebody's saying that. She inspects readiness of military at India border. Well, there you go. At 3%, China's 2022 GDP growth lowest in 4 decades, and if their figures are now anything like India's, it's probably way below 3% because we are beginning to lie, so are they. They always have. iPhone, Apple of India's eye, hits 1 billion export mark in December, but here again we'll have to calculate what goes into the Apple because eventually it's being assembled. A lot of this is components coming from China, so eventually you might just have a value add of 10 to 15%. Hey, but it's a start. China sees population dip after decades. Challenging for good old Xi. Infra push scales up capability across NSE. Hey, when will we see the results? When will we see the results? We're not seeing anything because China continues at a pace. China building dam close to Indian border. Amid LAC tensions, IAF to conduct air combat drills in Northeast. Oh well, somebody's up there. And Quatra visits Thimphu after Sino-Bhutanese boundary talks. This is another place in flux. India's got to watch it. And like I said, you saw iPhone going up to 1 billion, but behind that is this. Surge in imports of Chinese finished goods alarms governments. Folks, more a little later. So while I was in Chennai, I happened to read the Hindu and an article by Happy Mon Jacob, right? Happy Mon Jacob. What does he write? The futility of underbalancing China. And this is our biggest problem. What does it say? He says, one of the most disquieting puzzles the Indian strategic community has been confronted with since 2020 are the sources of New Delhi's underbalancing behavior towards China. He says, there has also been some decisive effort to curtail India's tech coupling with China, and yet there doesn't appear to be a comprehensive assessment of the China threat and an evaluation of potential Indian responses. What is missing is an unambiguous political commitment to meet the China threat. New Delhi's China strategy is akin to closing one's eye and pretending it is dark around. How challenging a statement is that, folks? How challenging is that statement, right? He says, and yet there are also significant risks in the current strategy of underbalancing China. For one, given the absence of active Indian responses, a far more powerful China is likely to increase the tempo of its territorial pursuits. More so, underbalancing China also entails a lack of political clarity regarding the China threat and the articulation of red lines to meet the threat. This in turn leads to an uncertainty about what India's friends and partners could or would do for India if there is a standoff with China. All India's fault. All India's fault. Uncertainty. Jai Shankar might call it balancing, concentric. Let me tell you this, folks. It's pure temerity. It is purely being afraid of losing a battle. And that's the problem with the Chinese military actions, totally controlled by the foreign ministry. There seems to be a strong strand of thinking in New Delhi that we should wait to build our capability to take on the China threat. But such a strategy of threat postponement is based on misplaced optimism, as China will continue to grow stronger than India, and by the time India catches up, if ever, it would be too late to take back the lost territory. For all you guys out there, understand this. So New Delhi's dilemma is this. While escalation is replete with uncertainty, non-escalation comes with slow but certain loss of territory. 2,000 square kilometers already lost. 4. Notwithstanding the accuracy of the argument that India's growing strategic partnership with the US is the reason behind China's aggression, China's aggression is indeed a good reason for New Delhi to strengthen its strategic partnership with the US and the West. We must become more open and forthcoming about it. There must be more clarity on how India's key strategic partnerships and defense agreements will come to its aid in the event of the escalatory situation with China. That Beijing will go easy on New Delhi if the latter goes slow with Washington is a dangerous expectation in the garb of lazy argument. Lazy and afraid and unthinking argument, folks. I'll add to that. The underbalancing of China has not helped, and it is now time to devise strategies to balance the China threat. And you've got to poke the finger in the dragon's eye, folks. That's what the army is there for. It's not there to guard the borders or patrol the borders. For that, we got the policemen. They need to fight, give it to them. They need clarity in what we are going, how and where we are going to respond. Not constantly talk. Check. The second part of the readout for second series on the China is something that I find that even Indrani Bagchi's got it right. What she writes is, acupressure in pain points. A softer Beijing in the new year is probably signaling its citizens, the US and Pakistan, not India. And she's got it right. What did she say? She says China pulled a rare positive headline this week, lifting a technical hold on banning Lashkar-e-Taiba leader and mastermind of 2611, Abdul Rahman Maki, which it had been blocking since June 2022. China's most wolfish warrior, Zhao Lijian, has been dispatched to fish in less troubled waters. The more pleasant Qin Gang, former ambassador to the US, has replaced Wang Yi, he of the permanent scowl, as foreign minister. Has China entered 2023 with a softer outlook? Should India breathe a sigh of relief? The US and not India is likely the intended beneficiary of China unsheathing its claws. Now, this is what I was telling you to think about, right? It's not about India. China is clear that only the US is its peer and deals are made among peers. China lifted this is the funny one, the hold on Maki after India completed its 2 years UN Security Council stint and as head of the 1267 Sanctions Committee. So India cannot claim diplomatic victory. But see what our newspapers are going about, and everybody's so happy. India did it. India did. China got what it wanted, man. India must move quickly to secure its current advantage in the Indian Ocean region, particularly with the US and Quad partners. Everybody's saying it. I said it in my previous statement. Forget about spending money on the borders. Just defend it. You got the equipment, you got the talent. You probably need to raise another a strike force division in the mountains, but it's the seas that matter. Chinese people won't be able to vote out Xi, but the prospect of mass protests and serious internal disruptions remains. These internal challenges have geopolitical consequences. Xi Jinping's buddy Vladimir Putin is struggling to stay afloat in a war that should never have happened. China is trying to keep its nose clean from US sanctions. It is battling the most intrusive tech sanctions ever. The CHIPS Act, the China-Russia axis is looking less attractive even for countries who believe China is the next US. Remember that. Anybody who's thinking that, right? Besides protests in Balochistan, Islamabad has not paid Chinese companies, and China's frontline partner is failing miserably as Pakistan's economy remains in free fall. China's other ally, North Korea, faces the prospect of South Korea building tactical nuclear weapons. This has huge implications for China. Japan, China's historical adversary, has taken a sharp turn with the new defense strategy, which is offensive in intent, including building fighter aircraft with the UK and Italy and pledging to protect Taiwan. Here India needs to get into the game. Join the partnership of Italy, UK and Japan. Critical. Most important, Indians see China as enemy number one. That's never a good sign. Ask Pakistan. Australia is doing AUKUS and Quad. The US is lording over the Euro-Atlantic as a result of the Russian-Ukraine war. China is finding it hard to get a word in edgeways. Okay, that puts it in a unique space. India is finally moving to build counter pressure against China in the Indian Ocean with its Quad partners and friends. At the very least, Xi Jinping won't sleep easy. Many countries will make sure of that. It's good to send the wolves back into the pen. But that's what India has to remember. It cannot take its foot off the pedal or have all these nonsensical summits with Xi Jinping. Please avoid that as a message. Cheers. And finally, as Anchal Vora writes, in the foreign policy press, Modi's China policy is a failure. And this is what the world is beginning to see and note and say. In 2014, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid out a red carpet for Chinese President Xi Jinping in Modi's home state of Gujarat in the hopes of building a rapport with the Chinese premier and laying a foundation to resolve their country's vexing border dispute in Tehmati. Nice. This is after, as Chief Minister of Gujarat, he'd been there multitudes of times, right? So they understood what he was all about. He didn't. Hundreds of Chinese troops were staring at their Indian counterparts while insisting on building a road inside Indian administered territory. The standoff only ended after 10 days. How many of you remember that, right? So while they were swinging around, the Chinese were punching us in the face. 5 years later, in October 2019, Modi gave Xi a tour of 7th century temples at Malappuram in South India. I'm not sure what message he was sending, right? However, but 8 months later, Chinese troops entered Galwan in Ladakh and killed 20 Indian soldiers with nail-studded clubs. There were 4 Chinese deaths. But thus 4 Indians claim a lot more, but whatever it was, right? This past November, for the first time since Galwan clashes, the two leaders met again. This time in Bali, Indonesia, as India assumed the G20 presidency. Within a few weeks of their handshake, Chinese troops carried out another offensive, this time to occupy a mountain post in the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh that China claims as its own. When will we learn, is my question. Maybe let's ask the concentric. I'm not sure what kind of policy this is, right? It absolutely confounds me. Modi's numerous attempts to woo Xi, whether through the evocation of hospitality, history, or global statesmanship, have done little to stem China's increasing assertive claims along its 2,100-mile border with India. That's the reality, folks, right? Yet, he has presided over a loss of men and reportedly also land to the Chinese. This is his premiership, right? But India-China relations is also represent a clear policy failure for Modi. New Delhi has limited options against a militarily and economically superior Beijing, yet experts say Modi's chosen China policy has been too cautious and passive to ever allows China to take advantage. When there is no pressure on the Indian government to respond to Chinese provocation, then they can continue to provoke. And folks, that is the reality. What's indisputable is that China's incursions have continued unabated during Modi's tenure. If Modi does not respond in a commiserate manner soon, 2 experts told FP, then he runs the risk of losing more territory to an increasingly assertive China under Xi. They've caught us as a soft punching bag, folks. We saw that when Indian military occupied Kailash ranges, from where Indians could see a Chinese garrison, the moment we did it, the Chinese came to the negotiating table. Jacob, the Shivnada expert, said they were refusing to do it at first. This was months after Galwan. When Indian military is proactive, then we can get the Chinese to behave. We must not think China wants a full-scale conflict. We should opt for a like-for-like response on the line of actual control, and the Chinese would step back. And this, folks, is the reality. Every time India has acted tough, whether it was under Indira Gandhi, whether it was Rajiv Gandhi, China backed down. The reason China is not backing down now, because they know that we don't want to bloody our hands. It's because we will lose. It's all driven by domestic politics. Unfortunate as it stands, this is the only part of India's foreign policy that's failed, and because of this failure, we've really not been able to accelerate our relationship with the United States, which is where I believe, and I think a lot of people also believe, where India's real protection and future lies. If we want to grow technologically, pull our people out of poverty, and at least be able to hold our own ground, folks. 3 cheers and Jai Hind.